I'd like to now call to order the Finance and Personnel Committee. And the first order of business is the roll call. Heidi, please.
Trustee Baker.
Present.
Trustee DeLay.
Present.
Trustee Freeman. Trustee Jacobs.
Present.
Trustee Johnston.
Here.
Trustee Smith.
Here.
Trustee Tracy.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Everyone should have in the book under Finance and Personnel Committee and an agenda that we'll be going through. There will be a few action items that we'll take during this committee. But before I begin that, if the board chair or the president of the university has any comments they want to make.
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, hearing none. First item of business is under tab 1. It's the minutes of the August 28, 2018 meeting. I assume everyone's had a chance to review that. I will now take a voice vote to approve. I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Good. Minutes are approved. Alan Thomas is with us today, and he'll walk us through the rest of the agenda. And Alan, it's your show.
Thank you, Trustee Jacobs and rest of your committee. Second item, I guess, is the update on the capital outlay and capital maintenance request for 2019-20. And I'm going to defer to Bill Waits to give you an update on that information and how those requests have made it through last week's THEC meeting.
Good morning. I'm going to give you a quick update on both the capital outlay and capital maintenance project funding. In June, the MTSU Board of Trustees, of course, approved the School of Concrete and Construction Management project as our FY 19-20 capital outlay project. Last week, the Tennessee Higher Education Commission released their priority ranking of all the higher education capital outlay projects. I'm pleased to inform the board that the SCCM project was ranked in at number 3 on the list and is the highest ranking of all the locally governed institutions. The THEC budget recommendation list will be sent to Governor-elect Bill Lee for possible inclusion in his budget. And of course, at this time, we don't know there's no certainty that the project will be funded this year, but I think the number 3 ranking is obviously something to be very proud of. And I'm optimistic that we will receive that funding. On the capital maintenance funding front, in June, the MTSU Board of Trustees approved the submitted 5 capital maintenance projects with a total budget of $8.1 million to THEC. After this submittal, THEC informed us that they were asking for an additional $30 million in higher education capital maintenance funding for FY 19-20. This equated to roughly $2 million in additional MTSU funding, capital maintenance funding. Due to this increase in budget, we revised 2 of the projects on our list, the Kirksey Old Main Mechanical HVAC, Fire Protection Lighting and Ceiling Project, to add replacement of exterior windows. We also increased the budget on the campus stormwater project. This is a campus-wide project. And then we also took a project that was slated for FY 20 and 21 and moved it to fiscal year 19-20, and that's the sidewalk repair and replacement project phase 1. It's also important to note on these capital maintenance projects funding, the funding amount may change, and we will have to kind of wait and see where the budget pans out. But right now, that's kind of where we're at. I'd like to.
Bill, that's great news.
Absolutely.
Very great news. Thank you very much. On both areas. So I guess, do we need to do anything other than if we were to run into Governor Lee to make sure?
That would be very helpful.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So we will see if we can we can make that happen, and Well, once again, that's great news and great news.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would add that I did get a call from the executive director of THEC, Mike Kraus, before it was officially announced, indicating that he was very supportive and that he's very optimistic that that building would be funded again this year. So the next step is certainly getting it through the governor's office and the legislature.
Okay.
Okay?
Are there any other additional comments?
Come to us as unrestricted operational appropriations. So we will have to see how that plays out as in years past. And those schedules we'll go over in just a second. On page 23, the second piece that I want to talk about is the guidance range for tuition increase this year, or for next year. THEC is recommending a 0 to 2.5% guidance range for tuition, and also for tuition and mandatory fee increases. So this will allow us to start looking at what our recommendations would be for an increase in those, which is a graph that shows you on our outcomes formula, if we had not changed any of our metrics, that we would have, the funding we would have received would have been 3.7 million. That's the number, that's our starting point. But as you see, you can go through our metrics down below. That's the funding formula metrics with a few other items for fixed cost and quality assurance. And then the bottom number is the 4.5 million that I was talking about earlier. So we've gained $1 million in our funding formula metrics because we improved those metrics. So we've gained $1 million. Otherwise, we would have, if everything else stayed constant, we would have only got the 3.7 million. So we increased that by almost $1 million.
Let me add to that, Mr. Chairman. We look at these metrics as really the major focus of the university with regards to how the formula works. And the areas we've actually shared this with you, I think, during your very first or second meeting, and we had Director Kraus come and talk about those. The two areas that we struggle with and will continue to struggle just because we don't have the number of master's and specialist degree to compare with our sister institutions is that area of, you see master's, well, we're making some progress in that area. Let me go back to the research service. That, as a result of a significant decline in our research when the state took away the $27 million grant, has really put us behind the 8 ball. And that is something that we're working very hard on to increase. Now, one of the anomaly of this formula is that we are one of the largest producers of undergraduate degrees in the state, just a few below University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And so we're producing close to 4,000 a year, undergraduate degrees each year. You have an institution who is producing like 1,100. They go up from 1,100 to 1,400. We go down by 10 or 20. Money is taken away from us and given to that institution that is so low that went up 3 or 4 percentage points. And you see that happening here, that last year we got significant dollars for producing of undergraduate degree. Then we would drop on graduation rates. This year we went up on graduation rates and dropped just a few on actual number of degrees that really hurt us. That is something that as we look at this formula, I think this is the year, Alan, that the state will be looking at the formula.
Yes.
We
5
have
years
to
out.
address that because it is not a fair process when you start comparing institutions like MTSU with that of an institution that has a graduation rate. For an example, one institution has a graduation of 36%. They got money this year in the formula because they went from like 32 to 36. We went up to 51, 52%, we lose money. So those are some issues, Mr. Chairman, you and I have talked about this, that we really do have to try to address. If not, this is going to continue to be a pattern.
So to that point, on page 27 in column G, just looking at the percentages of the LGIs, we got the lowest percentage increase. Of going down to the University of Tennessee system, there's one school there with a lower increase than us, which is UT Martin. Kind of help us understand, again, at a high level, why some of these schools are getting these bigger increases.
As I mentioned earlier, and I gave the example of the 36%, we're actually being penalized because we've been successful over the years. They base the increase on the percentage of an increase within the institution. And so a classic example is the institution that had a 32% graduation rate, move up to 36%. They end up getting a larger increase because they moved up 4 or 3%, significantly below where we are. We went up by 2%, and you can see the slight increase that we've gotten. So the numbers, basically, we are being disadvantaged because of our numbers and our size. For example, for the University of Tennessee, I'll give that a good example. When you look at the details of the various categories of enrollment, Trustee DeLay, Pell Grants, first generation, adult students, all of those categories, MTSU has significant number compared with the University of Tennessee. Average ACT, I think they just advertised at University of Tennessee 27, 28. Most of their students go full-time. They have a graduation rate of 85%. That we're competing with that with the students that we have, and as you know, who struggle financially to stay in school. So when you see the numbers drop, for an example, on the 30 and 60 hours, a student drop out because they have to work or take care of a family member, we get dinged for that. Schools like Martin, which is rural, students go full-time, they don't work 40 hours. UT Knoxville, where the majority of their students are full-time, they don't have to work, the advantage goes to them. That's the bottom line and causes that differential. And we really do need, we actually raised that issue at the beginning in 2010 when they were putting this formula together. And all the other LGIs were against it except the University of Tennessee Knoxville because it advantaged them. Tony, you remember that discussion?
Absolutely. I'm with you. I remember it very well.
So it's going to be very difficult with this current formula for us to be competing at that level. The other thing is we just start getting master's and doctoral degrees, professional degrees. And so when you look at the numbers of what Memphis would produce, who had tons of doctoral degrees for many years, the same thing with the University of Tennessee Knoxville, it is very difficult to compete.
So may I ask a question, Alan? The most significant negative factor, if I'm looking at page 29, the
Yes.
breakdown, the Masters in Education Specialist, like Dr. McPhee was just talking
Yes.
about. Do I understand correctly that this is a decline in the formula based on our performance in that area? The numbers who are graduating with Masters in Education Specialists?
And that's a decline in those.
The
In those degrees,
specialists.
graduating
Yes.
with those degrees.
That
right?
the state took away
And took away the funding.
Yeah, and that
Well-
was a big area for us because we're a big teacher ed.
Teacher
and so
ed,
every
yeah.
summer we would have tons of
Right.
teachers taking degree in special because they were getting a bump in their salary.
Salary.
So when the legislature took that away,
Oh, it disincentivized
Yes.
the
Yes.
the
To
people
come
coming
back
to get the
in.
degrees.
Right.
So And do I understand correctly that relative to the other LGIs, we have comparable number of graduate programs? Is that fair to say?
No. Particularly the size like the University of Memphis and UT Knoxville or Tennessee Tech, and even TSU. Again, historically, MTSU was held back from developing graduate degrees because of the Gaia lawsuit. It was only until the last 10 years or so that we started pushing forward to get graduate degrees. And so we are significantly at a disadvantage when it comes to research, because in order to produce significant research dollars, you have to have a significant number of graduate programs.
So, and I don't know the answer to this question, so I'm not an attorney. Have we looked at the factors that may be, other than losing that grant, which I understand, factors that may be not incentivizing candidates to come to MTSU to enroll in existing graduate programs? You follow my question?
Yeah, try that again. Let me see if I can follow.
What I'm looking for is, have we looked at what might, let me reverse the question. Have we looked at how we might incentivize people to come to do a graduate program at MTSU to directly address this?
Absolutely. And you can see the growth in that over the last 5 to 7 years. And Dr. David Butler, who we hired a couple of years ago, as you know, that's one of his major efforts, and we have seen an increase in that. But we are playing behind the 8 ball, and it's going to take us a while. But to your question,
I agree.
yes, we have.
Yeah.
And that decrease is smaller than it has been in the past.
Yeah.
I mean, it is getting smaller
Oh, gotcha.
than in past years because of, growing those master's degrees and getting those.
Is there, and so I'm going to ask a more detailed question. The weight applied to that part of the formula, is it lower than the other portions? In other words, would we get as much of a return from an investment in that area for the funding formula?
It is not weighted as high as our bachelor's because that's where where we wanted most of our weight.
Right.
But it is still a hefty weight.
pretty good.
Yes, it is. But you do not want to start adjusting those weights as you're growing that area either, because as
Oh,
you're
no.
growing.
I'm
yeah.
certainly not
Right,
advocating
but-
changing
And that is
the
something
hour.
that you will want to look at,
Gotcha,
though, as
gotcha.
this new cycle comes around, is look at your weights at the same time you're adjusting the formula, but you've got to be careful adjusting where you're trying to grow those areas so that you don't start penalizing yourself.
Right.
In
And
those
so
growth areas.
what I'm kind of getting around to is I'm wondering whether there would be a proportionate increase in Masters in Education Specialist candidates if we could better incentivize them. We're limited in how much we can grow graduate programs. There's just a certain speed we can go because we all understand the process we go through to get these programs established. But in the meantime, while we're trying to grow programs, we might incentivize candidates to come to participate in the existing programs. Does that make sense? Follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, and we're doing, let me give you an example, the MBA program. We had a traditional MBA program. In order to increase that, the MBA program, the master's degree program, we developed a flex MBA program that has grown significantly. Another example would be the Master's in Professional Studies program. Not only have we incentivized, but we've developed a pretty aggressive digital marketing campaign that have seen significant increase over the years. If you had taken these measures 10 years ago, all of these for the master's, doctorate would have been in a negative column. Keep in mind, it was only about 10, 12 years that we got doctoral degree programs. We had 0 doctoral degree programs, and we had our institutions, both UT and Memphis, actually against us for getting these doctoral programs. Now, you see what's happening on this chart here? We're getting $261,000 for those. They are young doctoral programs. They are just being developed. So we see more progress. I think you'll see greater growth in those programs. So to your question, yes.
By the time this board meets again, the legislature will be going 150 miles an hour. So I hope somebody's working on, if this is the year to adjust the formula, we need to come up with constructive suggestions for our legislators that, I understand it, that where we're disadvantaged, but this is the year to change that. And that's one of the things that your board's supposed to be able to help with.
And is our fundraising and foundation work aligned with helping subsidize areas that if they
correct.
apply the appropriate amount of resources, we will measure better on the funding formula.
That-
For every dollar we raise privately, we ought to be able to get more money publicly
Yes,
if we're spending our money wisely.
that's correct.
But somebody's going to put
But-
together, we'd like to change 11A from 2 to 6
Yeah.
and 11B from 6 months to 2 years. I mean, we need a constructive thing to hand to some. If we say we're unhappy, we won't ever get it.
Well, Mr. Chairman, you're right, and Alan will tell you in my cabinet that we've had extensive discussion. We have some ideas that we're going to take forth on that when that comes up. And also, just timing, I spoke to Russ Fair just this morning about meeting with him. That's the lobby group that we've hired to begin laying out our legislative strategy for this upcoming session. So
Excellent.
you're right on target on that.
Any other questions? Okay.
So let me ask you, we do or we do not have a strategic plan to accomplish what you want to accomplish that we've been talking about?
We do.
All right,
And-
why don't we carry it out?
Well, we are. One of our strategic plans is to grow our graduate program and research. That's in our plan, our 10-year plan, a 5-year plan. And there are some very,
Only if they made reference to the cost of developing the program.
yeah, and,
That's not really.
but I gave Tony some examples of how we're doing that, and that's part of our strategic plan. We totally reorganized our graduate program, our graduate office, hired a new graduate dean, as part of that plan to increase not only graduate programs, but also research dollars. And there is a series of initiatives that's going on right now to do just that, and that is part of the plan.
This is the biggest low-hanging fruit that you're going to pick low-hanging fruit, pick the big one.
Will that get us there this year?
No, it'll take time for us to get there. Again, you have to have the program, your master's and your doctoral programs develop over a period of time, but we are making progress in that area. And again, if you go back the last couple of years and see what we were producing in the master's and doctoral program when we first started and look at where we are today, as Alan just mentioned, you see a growth in that area.
Credit hours to see we're getting, to see what some of these big ones are getting. See some increases.
If you'll turn to tab 4, we're finished with that section. The 2018-19 October revised budget. This is the second budget of the year. If you recall, you approved the July budget back at the June meeting. The October budget is takes the July budget and adds in a few more known factors like the tuition increase that was approved at the June meeting, our enrollment, what our enrollment actually was for the fall, and a few other known factors that we know about appropriations, health insurance, and some information like that. We did put a little bit of the tuition increase into the July budget, I think about 1.5%, but we approved, this board approved 2.84%, so we put the rest of that in there. And then we adjusted for fall enrollment, and then we adjusted for tuition benefits, some other information that we received from the state. So the attached schedules in this section just go through and show you the adjustments that are made since July. On the expenditure budgets, the difference between July and October is that July is a base budget. October, we're rebudgeting all the student fee accounts that have balances in them at June 30th. They can't just go into the general fund. We have encumbrances where purchases had gotten started in the old year, but were not finished, so those balances come forward. We just rebudget all that so that they can occur in the new year. So that's why what you'll see there. And then in the auxiliary and the restricted budget, you'll see very little change. We know a little bit more about some of our federal programs, our state lottery funds, some information there. So you'll see some adjustments that we know in those budgets. On page 40, you'll just see a summary of the entire university's budget by category. And you'll notice that our total budget is up about 1.6 million from July to October.
I have, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
It says endowment income. I guess the question is, how large is our endowment? Or what is our endowment, and what was our return last year? Or the last 12 months, or whatever your accounting period is?
39.
Yes, sir.
That endowment income is the income off of our chairs of excellence, and which is held at the state, which they require that to be held at the state. So that endowment income is the payout that we get from those chairs of excellence, which I believe is I believe it's 4%.
So there's 20 million in endowment then. I mean, I can do the math. If it was 3.75, it'd be 20 million.
Right. I'd have to look back at,
I mean, does that sound right? There's 20 million in chairs of excellence?
because it's based off of, I think it's 30, right.
Okay, well, I mean, that's
Right. And some of that, they do not, we get that payout, but some of that rolls back in if we're not spending that each year. It rolls back into
Is that ever a
the
problem?
endowment.
we don't
Well,
spend it.
if we don't have a chair filled
I got
or
you.
something, it rolls back into the corpus
I hear you.
and stuff. So we'd have to look at it chair by chair to know if we're getting all of that.
And that's only endowment for the chair.
Yes.
There's the endowment for foundation
Is held in the
separate
foundation.
still. Yeah.
Yes.
One more question. Greek row went from 150 to 0. I mean, is there an explanation there? I've gone back on your page. 38.
38.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm just,
Oh, that's good.
I don't know that it's not good or bad.
Okay.
It's jumps out at me now.
Right. That's where we are working with, I guess, the Greeks on the houses that are still on Greek Row. And we are working with them to, I guess, set a budget on that one, and that one's just not in
Okay,
there
no,
yet.
that's fine.
So we will work on, we'll probably have that one in there in our spring budget. So. Okay. This is an action item and does require a vote.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
Sure.
There's an answer, I'm missing it. On 35, private gifts, it's lined out 0. On page 39, it's 2.4 million. Can you help me there? Private gifts,
What was the second page number?
39.
Okay. On the first page, which is page 35,
Right.
that is unrestricted private gifts. Okay, we
In other
we don't
words,
get,
no attachments.
right.
They just come in.
There's not a lot of those, and we usually don't budget for those.
All right.
Now, we will have some of those actual at year end, but they're very few. On page 39, that is restricted. Those are restricted private gifts. So So those come in the form of a grant that is coming from a private corporation.
So more grants,
Right.
but grants are considered private gifts? You got,
Well,
above that,
not-
you have private grants.
Not grants, but they are private gifts with restrictions. I said, I guess, yeah, there are restrictions to them.
Earmarked.
Earmarked, such as the
Yes.
ag center or
Yes.
Yes.
aviation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Earmarked.
Okay.
So there's restrictions on them, so that's why they're there instead of over on the unrestricted side.
So our history for private gifts has not been very, we've not had very many private gifts.
Right.
Well,
Well,
that's separate. I mean, yeah.
Because-
Good question.
because-
Go ahead, Clint.
because we have a foundation.
Right.
That's been used to do that for
So
the
that's
university.
why it would be,
Yes.
okay,
There, yes.
okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. Good.
And I want to ask one more question real quick. I note that on the revised October budget, the budget for research was increased about 80%, which I think addresses the point I was raising before. I'm going to assume, since I wasn't involved in this budget process, that this is an 80% increase in the budget for research that's going to hopefully address that question of how we get funded in the formula. Is that a fair assumption?
The research in that is a lot of where we re-budget indirect cost accounts.
Okay.
Okay, so we get indirect cost off of our
Off
grants.
those grants. Mhm.
And then we funnel that back in so that we can go back out and get
We can
new
invest.
grants.
Exactly.
So that
Yeah,
is an
I follow you.
investment
That's
in
what
getting
I'm-
more
that's
research.
what I'm
That's
saying.
making
Yeah,
earlier.
yeah, yeah.
So-
That's-
So that, to answer your question, yes.
Any more questions for Alan? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the 2018-19 October revised operating budget.
So moved.
Got a motion?
Second.
Have a second. Any more discussion concerning the revised budget? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes. Any opposed? Okay. Thanks, Alan.
Okay. Looking at tab 5, regarding compensation update. And I will turn this one over to Ms. Kathy Musselman to give you an update on what has occurred since the 2 meetings ago.
Hey Kathy, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are
Do
you?
you know when the road's gonna be fixed?
He lives on the road.
Soon.
On the other side.
I live on
Not
the other
soon
side of the
enough.
road, and it is very difficult to manipulate to that side, the other side of campus. So hopefully, I'm pegging December.
Oh, okay.
Good morning is officially good morning right now. I've got 9 minutes. So thank you all for the opportunity to update you on what's happened with MTSU salaries over the last few months. In May of 2018, you all approved a salary allocation of $6.1 million. And so since that period of time, we have been implementing multiple changes in compensation. In July of this year, we awarded a 1.5% or $500 increase in salary for anyone that was employed on a full-time basis as a benefited employee, 1% or $500, whichever was greater, for those individuals that are employed June 30th or before. After that implementation, we set our sights on implementing market adjustments based on the allocation that you had made of $6.1 million. What we had left was right at $3 million to allocate for increases. So in October which is just last month, we implemented the portion of market adjustments based on the 2014-15 Coupa data. Of that, when we looked at the data after we had applied the 1.5% or $500, it was going to cross right at $7 million for us to fully fund those adjustments. Based on the funding that we had available, we were able to increase the predicted salary versus their current salary by 37%. So even though I'm pleased to report that we've made strides, we still have a long way to go. If we, based on what we have left over, if you look at the charts that I've provided in the materials, we still lack about $4.8 million to be able to fund all employees up to the 2014-15 market data. So I guess that state appropriations that we're talking about, if we could just use that, it'd be great. So anyway, that would only fund salaries. But we plan to, at the next committee meeting, to update the data to 2017-18 to show you how far behind we are for the current market data. I'm not sure where we'll be. I'm afraid we may be back to the $12 million mark, but we shall see. But we'll be presenting that to you. So anyway, be glad to entertain any questions.
Any questions for Kathy?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to add the feedback we've gotten from the faculty with regards to the board's decision to address the market issue. It's been very, very positive. I know we have the president of our faculty senate here. And with your permission, I'd like to call on her impromptu to talk a little bit about the process, the involvement of the faculty, and the kind of feedback that she's gotten, if that's okay with you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely.
Professor Holloway? She's a faculty. She always will be on guard and ready to go.
This is totally impromptu. Yeah, the Faculty Senate throughout has been, first of all, really informed throughout the process by Dr. McPhee and Alan Thomas and the rest of the administration. From the very beginning of this last year, they talked to us about what some of their ideas are about how this salary plan might be implemented. The Senate gave them feedback about it. And now this first phase of the salary plan has been implemented. We've also been discussing phase two, making some, thinking about if we want to make any recommendations. And so this has been very much a faculty, there's been a lot of consultation and a lot of shared governance here throughout this process.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else, Kathy?
That's all I have.
Thank you. Alan?
Tab 6 is an item that we have brought to you before and told you we would bring it back at a later date. It's our Regional Scholars Program. You've heard to us, we've referred to it as our 250-mile radius program, where students within a 250-mile radius get a reduced rate from our out-of-state full-time rate. If you look at the background information, it tells you what the requirements are there. What we did here was put 3 scenarios together that show an expansion of this rate. And the 3 scenarios we put together was looking at expanding this to include the entirety of all 8 border states. Currently, if you we drew a 250-mile radius from the middle of where Middle Tennessee State University sits. So that did not include, each of the border states in their entirety. So we said, let's expand that to include the entirety of those 8 border states, and then it grabs a little bit of 4 additional states. So we said, let's include the entirety of those states. And the 3 scenarios were if we maintain the 25 ACT that we do today for the undergraduate population, if we reduce that minimum ACT to a 23, and if we remove that ACT academic requirement altogether. So if you look on page 55, it outlines those 3 scenarios for the undergraduate program and the financial effects that it could have. And I'll kind of walk you through the first one, and then we can kind of look at the others. If you can go through the first one, the other 2 kind of model that calculation. On the first one, if we expanded it to include all the border states, kept the current academic requirement of a 25 ACT, we currently have 9 students within those states that are not currently receiving that reduced rate. And it shows you that we have an annual revenue from those students of $227,000, and they currently get an annual scholarship of $27,000. We show over the next 4 years that they graduate on an even basis, a couple each year. And what we did was, if we wanted to stay revenue neutral, how many students would we need to bring in each of those years to stay revenue neutral? So if we graduated 2 students in 2019-20, and we were down to 7 current students, we would need to bring in 18 new students to kind of stay revenue neutral that first year, because we're giving those 7 students that reduced rate. And then if you go follow across, then you would just need 2 students those next three years. And then if you look at the last column, it's 25. So we're going from 9 students paying the full out-of-state rate to 25 paying the reduced regional scholars rate. And that's just to keep your revenue as it is today. If that 25 went to 30, then you're going to have a revenue surplus of what you have today. If it went to 35, to 40, whatever. The numbers shown in red on the bottom show that if we didn't bring in 1 new student, we stayed at 9, and we gave them the reduced rate, then that shows in that first year we would have $129,000 less revenue from those 9 students. And in the second year, all the way through the 4th year, of approximately $500,000. So if you go to the second one, it works the same way. You start out with 22 students. By the end of 4 years, you would need 51, which is, of course, a heftier number of students you would need in that first year of 34, just because you've got a greater population there. By the time, if you didn't bring in any new students, you could have a revenue loss of $1.2 million. And of course, if you went down and said no academic requirement, the numbers get quite a bit larger, and your potential loss, revenue loss, would, of course, be larger as well. So our recommendation, I think, to the committee and to the board would be the first expansion to the border states under the current academic requirement of letting us do keeping it at the current academic requirement, but expanded to the entirety of all the border states, and let us bring in the additional students. 18, we think we can bring in more over that time and get up to the 25 over a 4-year period.
Remind us, what are the current academic standards?
Okay. On the undergraduate, the current academic requirement is a 25 ACT, and they must maintain full-time enrollment, meaning they take 12 credit hours, at least 12 credit hours. And those are the ones that, those are the ones we focused on, because if you're taking the 12 credit hours, you're full-time, you're going to be staying in school, you're more likely to graduate. You've got the 25 ACT, and then that factors into the formula, your retention, your graduation rates, so forth.
I just want to add that we're trying to be fiscally responsible here. We know that other institutions have opened up this and have found themselves in some major financial problems. We are optimistic that we will beat these objections and projections. And the reason we are optimistic is we just got off the road after 6 weeks, 2 nights, 2 days a week in the boondocks, including Georgia, Kentucky, and Alabama. And we've seen a significant increase in the interests of out-of-state students as we recruit them. However, we also need to take in consideration that if a student can go and major in English in Alabama and pay in-state tuition, and then come here and pay twice or 3 times the amount, the chances are very unlikely that we would get those students. So we focus on our innovative and unique programs like our aviation, our concrete, and we've seen a great deal of interest in that. So we'd like to use this year as an experiment in expanding it and then see what the numbers are, and then we perhaps will come back to you next year with either an adjustment up. We'd like to think it will be adjustment down so that we can even expand it further.
And then one more item, if you turn to the back page, page 56, it just shows the graduate program. The undergraduate is the higher numbers and kind of drives the program. But for full disclosure, the graduate program just gives you the numbers on there. They're much smaller. We're talking 6 students. We would need to grow that to 11 students as well on there. So. And this would require a vote on an action item.
I'd like to make a motion that we expand using the same academic criteria to the border states.
Second.
Any further discussion or questions for Alan? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. It's done. Thank you, Alan.
Let me thank the board for approving that, because we actually were with some condition when we went out the last couple of weeks telling the folks from out of state that we are going to recommend this, but it will not be official until the board approve it. So you've backed us up. Thank you so much.
Can we,
I'm glad you were nervous, because I was thinking about voting against 17 more patients or whatever the number is. But no, I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
I hope we can get that tracked on not just once a year, but,
Quarterly?
yeah, because we've talked about it. You can get 25 more. If we only have 9 now.
I know.
And you got 22,000 children, you're not getting anybody.
Yeah.
You know, a question I would have is, out-of-state students who are coming longer distance to be here, are they not, on average, taking a higher number of hours? So our current requirement's 12 hours.
You would think.
And that's what I proposed. But would it be unrealistic to say they're probably taking more than 12 hours now?
Mark,
I don't, how many hours do you think those students?
Do you think these out-of-state students who've come a greater distance are taking a higher workload?
They're largely enrolling in 15 hours at the time of enrollment. The question is, do they drop a class over the course of the semester because they're struggling?
What is the maximum you can take? Is there a maximum?
The maximum they can enroll in, 18 without permission of somebody in an apartment.
Just a thought. I mean, motions made, passed, but just a thought. They're good students. They're 25 when they come. Perhaps they drop because they can and still maintain this. If it was 15, do you think they would drop?
It's hard to tell.
You're trying to track toward graduation. That's part of the criteria for state funding.
They're in part dropping because many of these students will also qualify for one of our guaranteed freshman scholarships, which requires that they maintain a 3.0 GPA. So if they have a struggle in a particular class that's going to knock that GPA down, they will drop the class rather than lose the scholarship over dropping below a 3.0 GPA. So that's part of what's going on.
I got you.
Do we use the SAT?
SAT equivalent, we have concordance tables that equivalent the two. They can take either test, we don't care.
You don't care?
No, we usually talk about ACT because Tennessee as a state is an ACT state.
Okay. Thank you, Alan.
Our last item, which is another action item, is, and we've talked about this one a little bit in the past, is last year in the legislative session, the Tuition Transparency Act was passed, which we need to start thinking about. One of the first items we need to probably have approved by this board is it requires the board to develop a list of factors that will be considered when you're developing recommendations to increase tuition and mandatory fees. So we want to go ahead and get that put on our website, put on the board's website. These are right now kind of high-level things that will be considered when you're looking to increase those two items. So if you look on page 61, there's a set of 5 factors, kind of high-level factors that we have put together for your review and approval. A couple of these are specifically listed in the Tuition Transparency Act, and then we've added a few more of these. These have been developed in conjunction with the other LGIs and the UT system and along with TBR, so that we're all kind of consistent on these. We will then also come back when we are proposing tuition and fee increases and outline these in a little bit more detail than they are here. These are more the broad structure outline, and then when we do have the actual tuition increase in the spring, we'll kind of refine these a little bit more. But as you can see, there's 5 of them there. A couple of them, the first couple are listed exactly as they are in the Transparency Act, and then we've added 3 more for your consideration there. So,
Dr. McPhee, does this work for you?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
and these would begin with the setting of the 2019-20 tuition and mandatory fee consideration rate.
Move for approval.
Second? Do we have a second? Need one.
Second.
Got it? Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
with your permission, I'd like to go back and just make one clarification on the regional scholars and the number.
Okay.
That 9 number, we have significantly more out-of-state students than is reflected in that 9. I want to make that very clear. And the majority of those students are on the academic common market and other areas where they have scholarship. These are, we're just looking at individuals who would move from Louisville to study English at MTSU and pay $27,000 or $30,000 to MTSU as opposed to paying $2,000 at the University of Louisville. Just give you an example.
Thank you.
Is that right, Doctor?
It is right.
Yeah.
We also have many students that are paying the full cost of out-of-state tuition that are coming to us from far outside of what has been the $250 range. So
Right.
we have students here from California and Nevada and whatever, and they're far outside of the R250 range, and they're just paying the full out-of-state tuition to be a part of our programs.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask for clarification? Who made the motion and who made the second on that, please?
Trustee Baker made the motion and Trustee
I second.
Johnston second.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Alan. Anything else before this committee that we need to talk about? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion for this committee to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
It's done. I guess what time is it?
We have lunch, Tim, is that right? And lunch schedule, and we convene at 1 o'clock.